morning, everybody. This is Jean here. It's a beautiful sunny day. It's been raining out, and the last few days I've been in my sewing room, and I've been making this quilt. This is in my next tutorial, this video. We're going to be making a chevron patterned quilt. This is the chevron pattern, and this quilt here probably could be one of the easiest quilts you would ever make. It's made with half square triangles. Done. It's so very simple. I had chosen this black. I don't know if you can see. It's black and silver and gold and gray. This isn't white. This is like a mottled gray from the manufacturer. Let me see. Let me tell you who it's from. This was from Bernatex's, and it's called Floral Impressions, black and ivory. But before I get into the tutorial, I would like to tell you a little story real quick about a chevron quilt that I had made, and why this pattern is fairly near and dear to my heart. I guess about 4 years ago, as you know, I sell my quilts, and in my little shop on Etsy, I had made a much larger chevron quilt, and I made it with like rainbow, yellow and pink and blue and green and purple and red chevron stripes with a bright white contrast. It was real pretty. I sold it to a faceless person on the internet. I boxed it up, and wherever they lived, I sent it away, and I got a 5-star review. I mean, 5 stars, no review or anything, and that was that. About 6 or 8 months later, on my private message, I actually received a photograph from the mother of a daughter who was using my quilt. And the photograph of this lovely woman's daughter, she was laying in a hospital bed and undergoing treatment. She must have been, she was a tall girl, perhaps, the woman didn't tell me, perhaps 14 or 15, maybe 17, not a lot of hair. And what had happened was she was laying there with a big smile on her face under my quilt. But what had happened was, before she went into hospital, all of her friends on the white of the chevron signed their names and best wishes with pen, with Sharpie, colorful signatures, smiley faces, hearts wishing her well, all in here. And it just, and this woman, and the girl was laying under her quilt, obviously undergoing some kind of treatment. And the woman wanted to tell me how much pleasure and comfort my quilt had brought this girl in her time of distress, really. Covered up with love and all of her friends' best wishes. So I like a chevron pattern quilt. Having said that, it was interesting because I was just reading a decorating article, and some woman in this decorating magazine, she goes, oh, like, my God, like, chevrons are so like 2014. And I'm thinking, well, that's true. It was a trend. Remember, everywhere you look, there were chevron, 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 chevron. And then it became, in the decorating world, or whatever world, I don't know, like sort of passe, like, oh, we don't, you know, that's was then, now is now. And I made a quilt back then. But I remember thinking back in about the late 60s, the early 70s, chevrons were a really big thing then. It was a trend, I guess, then. And for me, it'll be a trend in 10 years. I like chevron prints. I think it's classic. And like, people who like report on trends or something that's trendy, like as if when it's over, it's been a bad thing. And I'm thinking, no, like that's not right. You know, like I always laugh about, well, I have big hair anyway. I always laugh about like the 80s hairstyle. Like, we look back and like, oh my God, what was I thinking? And I'm thinking, I was thinking I looked great. What are you talking about? Yeah, I had big hair. And I wore day glow. I mean, you know, neon. But you know, and leg warmers. I thought I looked super. Like, why do people do that? You know, you know, why do people look back on a trend or something and like, oh my God, this is 2014. Anyway, that was my little thing. My chevron quilt, both somebody love and somebody else hates a chevron. But anyway, today, whether you like it or not, we're going to make a chevron quilt. I wanted to tell you I've started out with 10-inch squares. You know me and my pre-cuts, 10-inch squares. I actually bought a pack of 10-inch squares. Now, I constructed this quilt. I want you to just take note. I constructed this each row of chevrons at a time because my pre-cut package, interesting, I was pulling it from it, and it's 42 pieces. I unwittingly thought there was going to be 4 of the same fabric. The reason I say that, each one of these rows here is 4 10-inch squares of fabric and 4 10-inch squares of contrast. So this is constructed 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows. And my charm square, I pulled off like the first like 4 layer cake 10-inch squares, and I got 4 of them, and the next one was 4, and then there was like 3. And then and I had to adjust my quilt size because sometimes you get 2 of the same pattern, sometimes you get 3 of the same pattern. So if you're using layer cakes or charm squares for that matter, make sure that you look at what you have ahead of time before you plan your quilt. I didn't do that. I didn't plan my quilt. So it ended up this size because I only had 4 of the same fabric. Having said that, again, you could make this like with 2 different colors, 2 different colorways, because the way we're constructing our half square triangles, you need 16 of these. So you could actually have 4 different fabrics to create this, if that makes any sense, a scrappy method. But anyway, my tutorial goes into how I constructed it. I've made my half square triangles in a different way. Half square triangles, oh my word. I was thinking, it's like the basic building block of quilt making. I think I said that. It's awesome. I love my half square triangles. I actually bound this with like a black and gold dot, and then I backed it with like a damask print. This was sort of mod, you know, and then I traditionalized it up with my black and white. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I quilted this just on the diagonal. Oh yes, this can be quilted on your home sewing machine. Nothing fancy. I mean, really nothing fancy. This quilt is so very easy. Just take your time, step by step, which hopefully I've made it clear in my video. I had screwed up on a couple of my videos, so some of the fabrics are different, but the steps are exactly the same. So bear with my tutorial as I jump from here to there, but it does make a bit of sense. So construct your half square triangles, construct your rows, put your 2 rows, if that's how you want to do it. That's how I did it. I like to see my quilt grow in front of me. And this is what I come up with today. So as I said, easy quilt. You beginners, you can make it. You can make it in all sorts. You could make black here. And you just need a high contrast. That's what I'm saying. You could have solids, black. You can make it small. You can make it huge. And then, as I said, I quilted this. What I did is I quilted each, in the ditch, each row here, horizontally and vertically, to secure the quilt. And then I just came along and I did this arrow. I had to do that, and turn my quilt. But I didn't actually stitch this part. I didn't stitch this seam here. That gives it a bit of puffiness. Again, my stitching is about every 2 inches across my entire quilt. Remember, you need to be consistent with your quilting stitches. But you can stitch this on your home sewing machine. You can make your half square triangle smaller. You can make it with charm squares. You'll see, I made these with 10-inch squares. You can make them with charm squares and make a little baby quilt. Exactly the same way. Very important that you pay attention to your layout because you can get screwed up actually. You want your chevrons, if you want this pure camera turned off. I'm saying if you want your chevrons exactly like this in the chevron shape. So that's my going to be my tutorial for today. I hope you like it. As I said, it's very, very simple. Put your own spin on it. You can turn as you're setting out these as you're setting out your half square triangles. You'll notice that you have to be, as I was saying before, you have to be real careful on the layout, because all of a sudden you might have a stripe and you're thinking, oh, or a square here, and I've adjusted that a little bit. But just have fun. I had fun making it. This did not take me long at all. And as I said, maybe you can make a graduation quilt for a young kid, and their friends can scribble their names in it. Interesting. It's called a signature quilt, and actually, it's not new. 100 years ago, our foremothers, they would painstakingly hand stitch a quilt around their quilting bee, and they would mostly use like a muslin or like a cream sheeting fabric for the traditional quilts that you see. And then each woman who contributed to the quilt would in pencil just, sign their name in a small block, and then somebody would go along and embroider that name. Quite a lot of those quilts exist today. So nothing is new under the sun. So that dear girl who had her body covered in love with all of her friends, 100 years ago they did it. Signature quilt. So maybe that's an idea for in the contrasting here. So anyway, have fun with it. I hope my tutorial addresses how it's constructed. It's really easy. Probably somebody else, one of these professional tutorials, could have done it in like 5 minutes. You make half square triangles, you put it in rows, you put it in the shape, and then I don't know. But I just tend to go on and on. I hope I don't go on too much. So anyway, have at it, have fun making your chevron quilt, which is like so 2017. See ya. So you've seen my finished quilt, and you know that I've said we started with our 10-inch squares from the manufacturer. What I've done also, I've actually, these are the 10-inch squares. I actually got a bit of yardage, so I cut some 10-inch squares. And we've constructed 10-inch squares before, if my other videos, half-square triangles from 10-inch squares. Remember, we stitched around 1/4 of an inch all the way around. You have to follow my other tutorials for that. But I was wondering, since I have to do, I want to end up with 16 half-square triangles, I was wondering if I could actually chain stitch them. And I found out I can. So what I've done is I'm putting my right sides together of my 10-inch squares, and instead of starting a 1/4 of inch like I did before, I am just literally starting at the very end. And my 1/4 inch, very, very important. Remember, I'm going to be stitching off the end of the fabric here. And what I've done is actually, before I did this, I've actually put together, I have four of the fabric and 4 of the contrast. I've actually put together the 4 right sides together. And here's where my chain stitching comes into play. I'm just going to take another one and 1/4 inch along, put this over here, 1/4 inch along, and just literally chain stitch these 4 sides together. Take my other that's been already done, put together, chain stitch this along, and then take this one. Now, actually, the next step that I'm going to be doing is cutting these apart. You'll have to forgive me. I'm sort of jumping back and forth from different fabrics, so it's a different fabric I'm using. Some of my videos messed up, but this is the first step that you want to do when you're going to be making this quilt. So here we are. We've chain stitched the 4 squares together, and you're going to cut them apart. I just do it like that. You know me with my threads. Come back and cut the threads. And then I just shift them around there. smooth that around, and then my 1/4 inch seam, and I just go right around, the edges of all 4 edges. But look, I have, how long is this taking me? My presser foot comes up, my needle goes down, I grab another one, presser foot goes down, matching up my 10-inch squares. Right under there. And then I'll go right along and I'll do all 4 sides right off. And so when I go to cut these apart, which is my next video, you must forgive me, it's not the same fabric, but it's the next step. So what you want, if you can see that, I'm just going right off and chain stitching it. I'll come along and I'll do all 4 edges around my 10-inch squares, and then we'll cut them apart. So that will be the next step. What I have done with this quilt, though, I've actually constructed 2 rows, and this method here, 4 squares of fabric and 4 squares of contrast, cut this way, cut like this, that you'll see, make 16 half square triangles, and there's 16 half square triangles in my 2 rows that create the chevron, but you'll see that in the next portion of my video. I'm making this quilt 2 rows at a time. I'm seeing how it works out. I actually had to unpick 1 row because I had 2 darks together. But you'll see the finished product and how it worked out. But again, very simple. This is your first step in making this quilt. Make your 16 half square triangles, and then we'll put them together. Now, I've just finished 1 row of my chevron, 2 rows, I should say, of my chevron quilt that I'm going to be building on. But it's funny, I'm looking at it, and it could be a table runner. Look at that. This literally is, let me see, this literally is 4 pieces of the 4 10-inch squares and 4 contrasting fabrics. Look at that, of 10-inch squares, and you have that large of what could be a table runner. You could add a border. That literally took me 10 minutes, well, 20 minutes to make. Literally, within this chevron pattern. Now, I actually have sewn these rows together, which I'm going to show you how to do. But what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be, as you've seen me do before, I'm going to cut my, we've just sewn these, I'm going to cut with my ruler from intersection point to intersection point. Remember to make my half square triangles. Very important that you don't shift your fabric. You just come around here. I'm doing intersection point to intersection on my ruler. If you have a rotary cutter, you can do that with your rotary cutter. Now this, look, my blade is, the last time I did it, I always screwed up because my blade was dull. But there are my half square triangles, and I'm going to do 4 of these, right? I have 4 of these finished blocks, as it were. I'm going to cut them, so I will have 16 half square triangles. And I'll show you, after I iron these, I'm going to take them over to the ironing board, and the half square triangles, 16 of them, make up that, what I've just showed you, that row of the chevron quilt pattern. You can do this. So, a lot of people have an actual, what is it, like a Lazy Susan cutting mat. It turns around, a rotating mat, is it called? I don't know. That allows you to turn your fabric, turn the whole thing around. I don't have that. So I do it this way. You can be very careful. You just lay your ruler right down on that intersection. That's real important. And then there's my 16 half square triangles in like 2 minutes, like amazing. Now I'm going to go press these, and I'm going to show, again, I think I've shown you in another video, but I'm going to show you how I treat my my ironed, my pressed half square triangles. Of course, you set your seam, you press to the dark side, and then we'll get rid of these dog ears, as I'll show you, and then I'll show you how I'll make up my my pattern here. I've ironed my half square triangles with it to the dark side, as you can see. Now, because it's been made and cut so precisely, this is how I get rid of my dog ears. I might be unconventional, but this is what I do. I stack up about 4 at a time, and as you can see, all those dog ears sort of line right up. I take a nice pair of scissors, and boom, done. They come on around on this side, and they're done. So I'll take 4 at a time. My 10-inch squares are a little bit off, but the manufacturers are perfect, and so my dog ears are pretty much exactly. So I do 1, 2, 3, 4, and as you've seen my other row, there, it's gone. My points are real good. Yeah, it's all right. If you want to do it right, like, I don't know, like real properly, like good quilters can do it, they do, like, they take a rotary cutter, and they rotary cutter them off with a ruler, 1 by 1. But like, this works. So I'm just stacking them up 4 at a time, because I've sewn pretty precise. And once you get good at it with the half square triangles are like the bread and butter of quilting. They're like fantastic. I could spend the next 10, 15, 100,000 tutorials making quilts with half square triangles. Unbelievable. Make them all sizes. But now what I want to show you is, we'll go back to our, where is it? Oh, where is it? Where did it go? Oh, I can't find it. Where the heck did it go? Where's my other quilt thing? Oh, okay, hold on. I gotta find my... Didn't I just throw it over here, folks? Where did that go? Okay, I gotta go find my other quilt. I thought I threw it over here. Okay, I gotta go find it. Oh, silly me. It flew off the edge of my sewing machine. I mean, my sewing table. Oh, boy. Okay, now this is the one I've done, right? As you've seen the finished quilt, I like the ideas, I think I said in my introduction, I like the idea of each chevron being the same pattern. Having said that, this makes up, like, if you have a scrappy, if you have tons of yellow and then red and blue, it makes rainbow quilt covers, rainbow color chevrons. But I like this, and literally each that quilt, that row right there is 8 pieces of fabric. I mean, cut me a break. It is so easy. Now we're going to do the next one. This always screws me up. Hold on. What do I want to do? I want to go... Oh, I should have done this before. So my next one... Oh, there we go. Yeah, so next one is this is going to be the white, or is it, this is like a pale gray. That's right, that's going to be my next stripe, as it were, but actually you're going to see this, right? You got it? So you put the white, or this is gray against the gray, so you see my chevron design coming out. Here's the point, and I just go along, gray to gray, and then pattern to pattern, and then the gray to gray, and then the pattern to pattern. But if you see, you can make, this is just one out of hundreds, I would say hundreds of designs that a half square triangle can do. This is literally one. So then, hopefully, Let me just move my camera back here. Yeah, there we go. So hopefully you can see. I've just laid this one out. So here I want to come along, and then I do design to do, oh, no, how do I do this? Yeah, design to design, or white to gray, and then I'm making my chevron design. You see this? Look how quickly this has made up. Very important that you have either a design wall, which I don't have, or a table, which I do have here, to lay out these row by row. This is not a block setting. This is, you're constructing rows by row, and boy, look how quickly it works up. I mean, this truly is a beginner quilt. It's just half square triangles, and look at that. We have a second row of beautiful chevron put together just in these few minutes. Now, I do want to, what is this? Yeah, I do want to explain how I actually stitch my rows together. So I've laid this out, and what I do is, and I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine to show you, I want to stitch this row together. What I do is I just pick up one, there's 8 blocks, 8 squares, I put one on top of the other, just like that, in the order that I'm going to sew them in. And then I'll take these, as it is, I'll take them right over to my sewing machine, and I'll show you how I stitch them together. I've taken my quilt blocks over from my put them in the row that I wanted to do, how my chevrons were going to be in place. As you know, one on top of the other, starting with the first one, and I always put my blocks to the right of my sewing table here. Now I do have a large table here. If you don't, you can put them to the right of your sewing machine, or wherever it's easiest for you to keep your mind in order here, how you want to sew this row together. All we're doing is sewing rows together. What I will do is I'll take my first one, and you can see the way we've actually designed them, put these over here, is that you can see the actual chevron. So I obviously I take my first one and my second one, I turn it over. Obviously I'm going to be doing right sides together. And since we've sewn these so precisely, you can be guaranteed that your 1/4 inch seam will allow for a really nice point. Even though we're not bothered about points, you're going to get your points correct. Remember your 1/4 inch seam in sewing these. Very, very important. Perfect your 1/4 inch seam, and you just sew right off. Now these you can't, or I don't know if you can or not, I can't really chain stitch these, and nor do I want to. I want to just, I just want to block by block, stitch along. So now I've done this block, and I'm just going to go along. Here's my gray chevron stripe, and I just put these together, and I'll start my 1/4 inch seam up here, and I'll just stitch that along. And again, we can be assured that it's going to be sewn lovely and precise, because we've cut it precise, we've stitched it precise, and it's going to work out really well. And so now I'm going to check, and oh, it's a little bit off, but that's okay. For all my talk, my point didn't match up, but who cares? So again, here I go along, and I'm going to stitch. You can see my dark chevron there, and point to point. Let's see if I can get this one right. 1/4 inch seam, and I'm just going to continue as remember there's 8 blocks in this size that I'm making, and I'm just going to stitch that right along and finish off, and I'll just keep doing this row. Keep doing this row until I have connected all the 8 blocks. Yeah, that's much better, that 1/4 inch seam. And then yeah, then I'll have gone over and I'll show you how I iron, I press this. Again, pressing is really important. So you can see I just go along and I'm going to attach this. And real quick, our rows, our blocks have worked up quickly and our rows have worked up unbelievably quickly. But at your own pace, don't rush it. Go through each method, each step, and you'll really enjoy making this quilt because it does work up very quickly. I've just sewn all of my squares together for this one row. And I just wanted to show you, I've taken it over to my to my ironing board, and as you know, I'm iron crazy. And what I like to do is I will use this spray water in just a dollar store water bottle, and because some of it can be on the bias, so you want to make very careful that you don't stretch it terribly. You can use either starch or a dry iron. It's your preference, but I quite like this. And what I've done is I've gone back to my other row, how I'm going to construct it, and I see that the other block that's up here, these seams are going that way. So what I want to do is I want to press my main seams going this way so I can nest them together. So cotton is a wonderful, wonderful fiber because it does stretch, but it can be in a very good way. It can stretch. So what I like to do is I just sort of manipulate my seams going all of this way, having sprayed it, and then with my iron I'll just come along and I'll just smooth. This goes to the dark side, this one comes. I'll just press or iron or whatever I'm doing my seams here that are all going this way, so that when I go to stitch this to my next row up here, I can sort of nest these seams together. And yeah, it's a marvelous. So I come along, it's a marvelous fiber. I just love 100% cotton. I'm just smoothing this along, not stretching, but getting it into the place where it should be. Again, you know me and my ironing, or yeah, I just think if you iron your quilt blocks within an inch of their life, press them, your quilt top will come together so beautifully. It might take a little extra effort or a few more seconds of your time, but just press your quilt blocks. If you need to starch them because you're working with bias edges, by all means, I really do I use water most of the time. And again, as we've stitched this row, as you can see, my points, that's a perfect 1/4 inch, ready for me to sew this row, or as I'm doing this quilt, I'm doing it in rows of 2, attaching it to rows of 2, the actual dark chevron. How I've explained it. So I've just pressed that right along there, and it's ready to be sewn. I'll now sew it to this row here, and then I'll sew this unit to my rows up there.